An ordinary evening turns into the beginning of an unexpected transformation in Clara's life, a single mother. After rescuing an elderly man who had collapsed on the street, she makes a sacrifice that changes everything. What seemed like a simple act of kindness quickly becomes the start of something much bigger, and full of mysteries. Before we dive into today's story, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to the channel. Stick with us until the end, because this story might be more surprising than you think. An unexpected night. The city streets were nearly empty on that cold winter night. Clara adjusted the rearview mirror of her taxi, battling the exhaustion of a long workday. Her goal was simple: finish one last ride before picking up Isabella, her 8-year-old daughter, who was waiting at her aunt's house. As she drove back toward the central station, something caught her eye. On the sidewalk of a dimly lit street, a figure was sprawled out. Clara slowed down, hesitating for a moment. Is it safe to stop? She wondered. But as she looked again, her heart sank. It was an elderly man, motionless, curled up against the cold. Without a second thought, Clara pulled over and rushed to him. "Sir? Are you okay?" she asked, gently shaking him. There was no response, but she could feel his faint breathing. Panic set in. Calling an ambulance seemed like the obvious choice, but she knew it might take too long. He needed help now. Carefully, Clara helped the man into the back seat of her taxi. As she drove toward the nearest hospital, her heart pounded. She glanced in the rearview mirror, watching the man's pale face. "Please, sir, don't let it be too late," she murmured, tears welling up. When she reached the hospital, Clara ran to get help. Nurses and doctors arrived swiftly with a stretcher, and she stood by, watching as they rushed him inside. A mix of relief and fear consumed her, wondering if she had done enough. Sitting in a hard plastic chair, waiting for news, Clara realized that this night would be far longer than she'd anticipated. When a nurse finally appeared, her expression unreadable, Clara sprang to her feet. Before she could ask anything, the woman said something that left her utterly speechless. "A sacrifice for a stranger." "He's stable for now," the nurse said, placing a gentle hand on Clara's shoulder. "But his condition is still critical. He'll need immediate tests and medication that aren't covered by public health care." Clara felt a pang in her chest. What does that mean? Doesn't he have any family? The nurse shook her head. "We don't know. He didn't have any identification on him, and no one has come looking for him. Without the tests and medicine, I'm afraid the outcome won't be good." Clara glanced at her purse on the chair beside her, where the money she'd carefully saved for Isabella's birthday lay wrapped in a rubber band. The plan had been simple: a day at the amusement park her daughter had been dreaming of. It wasn't much, but it was enough to create precious memories. Now, that dream felt so distant. Clara knew this wasn't her responsibility. After all, who was this man to her? A stranger. Yet she couldn't shake the feeling that her intervention held a greater purpose. "How much does he need?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. The nurse mentioned the amount, and Clara felt as if the ground had been pulled out from under her. It was nearly all the money she had saved. With trembling hands, she opened her purse, pulled out the bills, and handed them over. "Use this to start the tests and buy the medication." "Are you sure?" the nurse asked, surprised. Clara took a deep breath. "Yes. His health is more important right now." As the nurse disappeared down the hallway, Clara sat quietly, a mix of peace and sadness washing over her. She knew she had done the right thing, but how would she tell Isabella that her birthday dream would have to wait? Hours later, as she left the hospital, the cold of the early morning felt sharper than ever. The taxi sat empty, the silence within echoing her doubts. Turning the corner to pick up Isabella from her sister's house, Clara noticed a message on her phone, a missed call from an unknown number. Little did she know, that call would mark the beginning of something that would change her life forever. The difficult conversation. As Clara parked the taxi in front of her sister's house, she glanced once more at her phone. The unknown number blinked on the screen, as if the missed call demanded her attention. Probably just a wrong number, she thought, pushing the idea aside. She didn't have the energy for more surprises tonight. On the porch, Isabella waited, wrapped in a blanket and clutching her favorite teddy bear. When she spotted Clara, her eyes lit up. "Mommy," she cried, running toward her. Clara knelt to hug her, feeling the warmth of her daughter's innocent love, but also the weight of the conversation she needed to have. Inside, Clara thanked her sister, Mariana, who greeted her with a curious smile. "You look exhausted. Is everything okay?" "Yes, more or less," Clara replied, trying not to reveal the whirlwind of emotions she carried. After a few quick goodbyes, she and Isabella headed back to the taxi. On the drive home, Clara tried to find the right words. "ISA, about the amusement park," she began, her voice hesitant as the quiet streets passed by. "Oh, I can't wait. We're going tomorrow, right? It's going to be the best birthday ever." Isabella interrupted, her excitement filling the air. Clara gripped the steering wheel tightly, feeling a lump in her throat. "Sweetheart, listen, something important happened today. I had to help someone who really needed it. Because of that, we might not be able to go to the park right now." A sudden silence filled the car. In the back seat, Isabella hugged her teddy bear and looked at her mother through the rearview mirror. "Are they okay?" she asked softly, her tone so gentle it made Clara's heart swell with pride. "I hope so, honey. I did everything I could to help." "Then it's okay, Mommy," Isabella said after a moment. "We can go another day. The important thing is that you helped." Clara smiled, tears welling up in her eyes. Her little girl was more understanding than most adults she knew. When they arrived home, Clara parked the car and got out to unlock the door. That's when she noticed something unusual, an ambulance parked in front of their house, its lights turned off. Before Clara could make sense of what she was seeing, a well-dressed man stepped out of a sleek black car parked just behind the ambulance. He looked directly at her, holding something in his hands, a large envelope. The arrival of Raphael. Clara's heart raced as the man approached. He seemed out of place in her modest neighborhood, with his tailored suit and confident strides. As he neared, he removed his hat, revealing neatly combed brown hair, and offered a polite smile. "Good evening. Are you Clara?" She nodded, feeling a bit uneasy. "Yes, that's me. Who are you?" "My name is Raphael," he said, extending his hand. Clara hesitated briefly before shaking it. "I'm Arthur's son, the man you helped today." Clara's eyes widened. "You're his son? How did you find me?" Raphael gave a slight smile. "One of the nurses at the hospital called me. My father managed to say a few words about what happened before losing consciousness. He mentioned a kind woman who saved him, taking him to the hospital in her own car." Clara was at a loss for words. Raphael continued, "I had to come in person to thank you. My father is stable now, And that's because of you." He extended an envelope toward her. "This is a token of gratitude from our family." Clara looked at the envelope, reluctant to take it. "That's not necessary. I just did what anyone would have done." Raphael shook his head firmly. "Believe me, not everyone would have done what you did. Please accept it. It would put my father's mind at ease to know your kindness hasn't gone unnoticed." Hesitantly, Clara took the envelope. When she opened it, she was stunned by the amount of money inside. It was far more than what she had spent at the hospital. Tears welled up in her eyes. I can't accept this." "You can and you should," Raphael insisted gently. "My family is fortunate enough to be able to give back. This isn't just to repay what you spent, it's to acknowledge that what you did is priceless." Before Clara could argue further, Isabella appeared in the doorway, clutching her teddy bear. "Mommy, who's that?" Raphael turned to the little girl and smiled warmly. "I'm a friend of your mom's. Did you know she's a very special person?" Clara smiled at Isabella, who glanced curiously at the envelope. Clara knew that the money was more than a blessing, it was an answer to the silent prayers she'd made during years of struggle. As Raphael said his goodbyes and walked back to his car, Clara noticed something in the taxi's glove compartment, a small object that didn't belong to her. Picking it up, she realized it was an old watch, with the initials AM engraved on the back. What could it mean? A renewed life. Clara held the watch in her hands, examining the engraved initials, AM. She was certain it wasn't hers. But how had it ended up in the taxi? Putting the mystery aside for the moment, she focused on the unexpected blessing she'd received. After Raphael left, she sat on the couch with Isabella, the envelope still in her hands. Opening it again to count the money, she could hardly believe her eyes. It was enough to pay off all the overdue bills, settle the car loan, and still plan something special for Isabella's birthday. "Is it a lot of money, Mommy?" Isabella asked, her eyes wide with curiosity. Clara smiled, pulling her daughter into a hug. "It's enough to help us a lot, Isa. God has been very generous to us today." In the days that followed, Clara felt the weight of her financial struggles begin to lift. She paid the overdue electric bill, avoiding a shut-off notice, and finally took the taxi in for much-needed repairs she'd been postponing for months. Everything seemed to be falling into place, as though her act of kindness that night had set off a chain reaction of answered prayers. Still, the old watch continued to draw her attention. It seemed valuable, and Clara couldn't shake the feeling that it might belong to Arthur. Deciding it was important to return it if it was his, she used the opportunity to visit the hospital. When she arrived, she was surprised to learn that Arthur had already been discharged. She asked if he had left any contact information, but the answer was no. However, as she spoke to the receptionist, a piece of paper slipped out of the watch. It was a handwritten note with an address on it. "How strange," Clara murmured, holding the paper. Was this address connected to Arthur? Or was it something entirely different? That evening, Clara resolved to visit the address. Not only to return the watch but also to uncover whether there was more to this story than she understood. While tucking Isabella into bed, Clara heard her phone vibrate on the table. It was a new message from Raphael. The short, cryptic words left her intrigued. "We need to talk. It's important. A day at the park." Before diving into the mystery of the watch and Raphael's message, Clara knew she had to fulfill the promise she'd made to Isabella. After all, her daughter's birthday couldn't wait any longer. The next morning, Clara woke up early and prepared a special breakfast for Isabella. "Are you ready for your big day, sweetheart?" she asked, watching as Isabella jumped with joy upon realizing the amusement park plan was finally happening. The sun shone brightly, as if the day had been tailor-made for celebrations. At the park, Clara's heart swelled as she watched Isabella dart between the rides, laughing on every turn of the kiddie roller coaster and delighting in a cotton candy bigger than her head. For a moment, it felt as though the world had paused. All the struggles, all the sacrifices, it was worth it for moments like these. Sitting on a bench as Isabella played, Clara reflected on how much had changed in such a short time. God, in his infinite goodness, seemed to be guiding her every step. Yet, Clara couldn't ignore Raphael's message. Her mind wandered back to the watch and the mysterious address. What did it all mean? And why did it seem like the more she tried to help, the more mysteries emerged? By late afternoon, as the sky turned shades of orange, Isabella was finally tired. Clara took her home, where she fell asleep on the couch with a smile on her face. It was the kind of peace Clara had always dreamed of giving her daughter. Still, Raphael's message lingered in her thoughts. Clara picked up her phone and quickly replied, "We can talk tomorrow. Something happened, and I think we need to discuss it too." The next morning, as Clara got ready to meet Raphael, an unexpected letter was delivered to her door. The envelope was plain, with no return address. But the contents left Clara completely stunned. The secret of the past. Clara opened the envelope with trembling hands while Isabella still slept in her room. Inside was a single sheet of paper, written in elegant handwriting. The words were clear but carried a weight she wasn't prepared for. "The watch belongs to my father, Arthur. It carries more than just time, it holds truths that can no longer be ignored. Please meet me today at the address on the note. It's time for you to understand the connection we share." Clara's heart raced. The watch, the address, Raphael's message, it all seemed to converge into a story she never imagined herself a part of. Yet, she felt she had no choice but to uncover the truth. Later that day, with Isabella under Mariana's care, Clara drove to the address on the note. The destination was an old house, its brick walls weathered and its garden overgrown with neglect. As she parked, she saw Raphael waiting at the entrance. He looked concerned, though his polite charm made her feel slightly at ease. "Clara, I'm glad you came," he said, waving her over. "Raphael, what's going on? I got a letter, and this watch, what does all of this mean?" Raphael took a deep breath before answering. "My father never spoke about this openly, but the watch is a symbol of something he left behind, a daughter he had before I was born." Clara's eyes widened in shock. "What are you saying?" "My sister, or half-sister. My father has always regretted not being there for her or her mother. When you appeared that night, saving him, he told me he felt it was a sign that he needed to make things right. He believes you might be connected to this story." Clara felt as if the ground had vanished beneath her. "You think I could be?" Raphael nodded. "It's possible. And if it's true, you're not just someone who saved my family, you could be a part of it." Before Clara could respond, the door to the old house creaked open. An elderly man appeared, his eyes brimming with tears as they met hers. It was Arthur. "Clara," he said, his voice thick with emotion, "there's something you need to know." Dilemmas of the heart. Clara froze at the sound of Arthur's voice. The elderly man seemed far more fragile than when she had rushed him to the hospital, yet there was a strength in his eyes that defied time and weariness. Raphael gently touched Clara's arm, urging her to step inside. The living room was simple but imbued with nostalgia. Old books lined wooden shelves, and black and white photos adorned the walls. Arthur settled into a nearby armchair, motioning for Clara to do the same. "I should have spoken about this a long time ago," Arthur began, his gaze fixed on the watch in his hands. "This watch belonged to someone very special, your mother." Clara's breath caught. "My mother? How did you know her?" Arthur sighed, gripping the watch tightly. "When I was young, I was in love with a woman named Helena. We loved each other deeply, but my family didn't approve. I was forced to leave her and had no idea she was pregnant until years later. When I tried to find her, it was too late, she had passed away. But I learned that she had a daughter. You." Clara's world spun. It was hard to process everything. "So, you're saying that you're my father?" Arthur nodded, his eyes glistening with tears. "I'm not a perfect man, Clara. I've made countless mistakes and lost things I can never reclaim. But God gave me an unexpected chance to right at least one of those wrongs. When you helped me that night, it wasn't just kindness, it was a miracle." Clara's emotions swirled, shock, anger, disbelief, and yet an odd sense of completeness. "I spent my entire life thinking my father wanted nothing to do with me. And now you show up, saying this, how do you expect me to react?" Arthur bowed his head. "I don't expect you to forgive me, Clara. I only want you to know the truth. And if you're willing, I want to be part of your life, even if it's too late." Raphael placed a hand on Clara's shoulder. "I know it's a lot to take in. But if my father has taught me anything, it's that it's never too late to try to mend what's broken." Clara looked at the watch in Arthur's hands, then at Raphael. Part of her wanted to embrace this new reality, but another part was filled with doubt and uncertainty. "I need time," she said, standing up. But before she could leave, Arthur began to cough violently, doubling over. "Dad!" Raphael shouted, rushing to his side as Clara instinctively moved to steady the elderly man. Faith in the storm. The sound of Arthur's violent coughing echoed through the small room. Instinctively, Clara held on to the elderly man as Raphael scrambled to find something to help. Arthur's breathing was labored, his eyes filled with a mix of pain and desperation. "Dad, stay with me," Raphael pleaded, kneeling beside him. Clara quickly grabbed her phone and called for an ambulance, the weight of helplessness settling heavily on her. Holding Arthur's trembling hand, she whispered, "Stay with us. Don't give up now." The minutes until the paramedics arrived felt like an eternity. When they finally did, Arthur was placed on a stretcher, and Clara and Raphael followed the ambulance in her car, the silence between them thick with worry. At the hospital, Raphael hovered near the door, restless for news, while Clara retreated to a corner, the weight of the night pressing down on her. Watching the chaos of the emergency room, she closed her eyes and began to pray. "Lord, I don't understand everything that's happening, but I know none of this is by chance. If this man is truly my father, if this is your will, then guide me. Please give him another chance. Let your will be done." When she opened her eyes, she found Raphael looking at her. "Do you always pray like that?" he asked, his voice soft but curious. "Not always," Clara admitted. "But in moments when I have no control, it's the only thing that gives me peace." Raphael smiled faintly, though his eyes betrayed a deep sadness. "I used to believe in something greater. But after losing so much in life, I wonder if it still makes sense. Clara stepped closer to him. Maybe this is your chance to find answers. Sometimes, God gives us unexpected paths to find him again. Before Raphael could respond, the doctor emerged from the room. Arthur is stable, but we'll need to keep him under observation. He suffered a severe drop in blood pressure and is very weak. The next 24 hours will be critical. Raphael thanked the doctor, but the worry in his face was unmistakable. Can I see him? Yes, but only for a few minutes. While Raphael went into the room, Clara stayed in the corridor, battling her own swirling thoughts. Could there truly be a greater purpose in all of this? And if so, was she ready to embrace this new reality? When Raphael returned, his eyes were misty, but his expression was a mix of relief and concern. He stopped in front of Clara and, in a low voice, said, "My dad wants to talk to you. He says it's important, something only you need to hear." The miracle of kindness. Clara hesitated for a moment. Facing Arthur again, after all the revelations, felt overwhelming. But Raphael's insistent gaze convinced her it was something she needed to do. Taking a deep breath, Clara stepped into the room. Arthur lay on the bed, looking even more fragile under the hospital's harsh lighting, but his eyes lit up when he saw her. He tried to smile, and Clara moved closer, sitting in the chair beside him. "Clara," he began, his voice raspy, "I don't know how much time I have left. That's why I need to say something I've kept in my heart for so long." Clara's chest tightened. "I'm here." Arthur reached for her hand, his own trembling. "From the moment I saw you that night, I knew God was giving me a second chance. But it's more than that. I know I can't make up for lost time, but I need you to know that I never stopped looking for your mother and for you. I made so many wrong choices, but neither of you ever left my heart." His words hit Clara with unexpected force, and tears streamed down her face. She had carried a quiet resentment her entire life for not knowing her father. Now, here he was, sharing a truth she never imagined hearing. "I don't know if I can forgive everything," she admitted, her voice trembling. "But I also don't know if I want to carry this pain for the rest of my life." Arthur squeezed her hand with what little strength he had. "I only wanted the chance to know you. And, if you'll let me, to care for you and your daughter, even if it's from a distance." Clara shook her head softly. "I don't know what the future holds, but maybe we can start here, with this conversation." Arthur's eyes filled with gratitude, but before he could say more, his eyelids drooped, and he fell into a restful sleep. Clara stayed by his side, holding his hand, as an unexplainable peace washed over her heart. When she stepped out of the room, Raphael was waiting. He looked at her, searching for an answer. "How did it go?" Clara took a deep breath. "It's a start. And I think, somehow, it was enough." In the days that followed, Arthur began to recover slowly. Clara decided that, despite all the uncertainties, she would give him the chance to be part of her life and Isabella's. More than that, she resolved to embrace the future with faith, knowing that kindness is never in vain. What about you? What would you do if you were in Clara's place? Would you have the courage to forgive the past and give the future another chance? Share your thoughts in the comments, your perspective might inspire others. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more heartwarming stories of hope and redemption. This is Narratives That Embrace. Stay blessed, and see you in the next story.